important. Now the second hadith about this is the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man ja'aka tardawna dinahu wa khuluquhu fazawwijuhu." Man ja'akum, whoever comes to you and you are pleased with his deen, this is about men. You're pleased with his deen, wa khuluqa, which is really important. Deen and character. And I love that addition, because see, somebody can have a religious name, but they don't have khuluq. They don't have character. And the thing is that the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I was only sent to complete noble character. So khuluq is really an important part of living with somebody, especially from the man's point of view. I mean, I find it interesting that in this hadith, it's not mentioned لِدِينِهَا وَلِخُلُقِهَا. It's just لِدِينِهَا. But in the other hadith, مَنْ تَرْضَوْنَ دِينَهُ وَخُلُقَهُ. His deen and his khuluq, because it's more important that the man have khuluq than the woman. Do you see? That is more important. And the reason for that is because the woman is in a weaker position by the nature of the majority of marriages. In other words, you don't want to marry your daughter to somebody who is not going to treat her well. So you have to look not just to his religion, but to his character, because somebody can be religious, but they're easily angered. And that's why Muawiyah was very religious. But when the Prophet ﷺ, somebody asked him about marrying Muawiyah, he said, don't marry him. Why? Because he was su'luk. And when he asked about another Sahaba, he said, لا يرفع عصاه عن عاتقه. He doesn't take his stick off his shoulder. And the ulama interpret it two ways. One, he travels all the time, which is not good for a woman. And two, he beats his wife. So he was telling you don't want to marry him, and he left it ambiguous, right? Because that was his nature, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But it's not ghiba, because it's nasiha, it's good advice. You're not backbiting when you're giving somebody advice. So if somebody angers easily, you don't want to marry your daughter to that person. And a woman doesn't want to be under somebody who gets angry easy, because what happens when people get angry? They do things that they don't mean. And then you go into this cycle, this dysfunctional cycle of, you know, the husband beats the wife and then apologizes, and it becomes a very unhealthy cycle. So the idea of marrying not just for deen but khuluq, of looking into the character of this person. And one of the things is to get them angry and see how they react. Right? And it's really interesting. And people traditionally did that. They got people angry just to see how they reacted. And that was a traditional way of testing somebody. So you want to have somebody who has good deen, but also good khuluq. Now, what did the Prophet ﷺ say? إِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا. If you don't do this, فَتَكُونُ فِتْنَةٌ. There will be tribulation فِي الْأَرْضِ, in the earth, وَفَسَادٌ عَرِيضٌ, and widespread corruption. Now, this is really important to understand, because at the essence of the deen of Islam is an understanding that the deen functions in ideal conditions. And when the conditions are not ideal, people deviate. Do you see? And that is why there's always an attempt to facilitate people's deen in the world. And that's why Allah is merciful, because so much of the deen, there's a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said about the people in the end of time, they would have the reward of 50 of you. And the Sahaba said, 50 of us? Why is that? And he said, because you have helpers supporting you in your struggle with your, to please Allah. But those people won't have any supporters. In other words, it'll be so difficult in those days that their reward will be greater, because the society is not facilitating that. So this is really important to note, that if you don't help people get married, that's how corruption emerges, right? You get people that just by the overwhelming power of their appetites, their emotions, they can actually do things that, had they been facilitated, they wouldn't have done that. So that's really important to remember, especially now, because it's really difficult. We have big problems in that area. It's good to help people get married. And there are many hadiths about the importance of that, and there's verses in the Quran about that, that Allah will enrich them even if they're poor. So those are the two hadiths that are at the root of marriage. One, marry your daughters to people who have good deen, but also who have good character. And two, when you look for a woman, look for her deen. Right? Look for her deen, because that's going to determine quite a bit of what type of relationship you're going to have. And as you get older and the novelties wear off and those things, the spiritual aspect of your life together and the journey that you're on becomes more and more important. And the Prophet used to do dishes. He sewed his own clothes. He sewed his sandals, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He kneaded bread. He did things in the house.